Hello and welcome. You're watching Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. US President Donald Trump has completed 100 days in office. Since Inauguration Day, Trump has taken a flurry of executive actions, including enacting steep tariffs, ending birthright citizenship, and cutting foreign aid. Trump signed over 140 executive orders. He announced reciprocal tariffs on all US trading partners on the 2nd of April before pausing them for 90 days. Tariffs were also imposed on steel, aluminum, and automotive imports. Trump claimed tariffs are good for the economy. But here's what has actually happened. GDP contracted by 0.3% in the first quarter as imports surged. Inflation is above the Fed's 2% target. Jobless claims are at a two-month high. The S&P index fell 7%, the worst start for stocks since Richard Nixon's second term in 1973. The dollar index fell 9%. Brokerages project odds between 40% to 65% for a recession to hit the US this year. Trump's approval ratings have slumped, with less than half of the Americans approving of his performance. At the moment, the Trump administration is negotiating bilateral trade agreements, and India could be among the first countries to clinch a deal. However, China continues to face tariffs of 145%, with no sign of direct talks yet. Trump 2.0 has already witnessed its first major overhaul with the removal of Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor. Remember, Waltz took responsibility for a chat leak on America's strike on Yemen's Houthi rebels. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be taking charge as NSA in the interim. So what next for the Trump administration and India-US ties? Joining us now is Atul Keshap, President of US-India Business Council. Ambassador Keshap, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Always a pleasure to have you on Global Eye. Let me begin by asking you, the mood in the American industry today. Donald Trump has completed 100 days as president. There have been concerns among industry chambers. The outlook on his tariffs, not very good. As someone who heads one of the most prominent US industry chambers, what would be your view?
So, Parikshit, it's great to be back on the show. Thank you very much, and warm greetings to you and to the audience. Look, business craves predictability, right? If you're a CEO or you're the investment committee of a major global company and you need to make a $10 billion bet on where to build semiconductors or some other critical element of the supply chain, you want regulatory and tax and policy predictability. It is the most important thing if you're going to make a 10 and 20-year bet that impacts your job, it impacts your share price, it impacts the well-being of your shareholders, it impacts your company and your workers and everybody else. So I think that getting to that point of predictability is really, really important. And in this regard, there is some good news. India is looked at, I think, widely around the world as one of the most stable polities right now. And I think that what we need to do is capitalize as soon as possible on the potential for a US-India trade agreement that would give a very clear and strong green light to those investors that investing in America and India for long-term success and happiness is the best and smartest possible thing they can do. So I encourage both sides great success and great ambition to lock this deal down.
Right. Those hectic negotiations are underway. In fact, different members of the US administration have said that India could be one of the first countries with whom the US will sign a trade deal. How soon do you expect that to happen?
Well, who knows? I mean, this is where the two sides are working with great focus. You saw Secretary Besant's remarks that India may be the first one off the mark with a trade deal with the administration. I think that's wonderful news. As the president of USIBC, we've been praying and calling for that for a very long time. So I wish them great success. You know, there's a lot of rumors swirling about when the Quad Summit might take place, which is supposed to be hosted by Prime Minister Modi in India this year. I would very much hope that that trade deal between the United States and India will be finalized before the Quad Summit. That will send an enormous message of confidence to the entire world, not only strategically, but also economically.
Right. Ambassador Keshap, right now there is a lot of talk of having a interim trade deal or an early harvest deal in the next 60 days or so, 60 to 90 days for that matter. If there were an interim deal to happen before the full-fledged BTA in fall. What do you think would be, or according to you, should be the essential ingredients?
So thank you. That's a great question. I think that the investor communities in both countries, Indian large companies, American large companies that have vast amounts of available investable capital, are looking for reassurance from both Delhi and Washington about their plans for semiconductors, their plans for critical minerals, for energy, for nuclear, for pharmaceuticals and life sciences, for artificial intelligence. You know, ours are the two leading economies on earth for trusted collaboration. And these CEOs need to hear loud and clear from the Indian and US governments that working together in collaboration on these critical and emerging technologies is something that is strategically and economically desirable, and that their investments in each other's countries and in their own countries in these critical fields and with key partners around the world, especially on critical minerals, is acceptable. So if there is an early harvest, I hope that it would certainly be in trade goods, and it can help ensure even freer trade between our two countries. But it's that signal, that framework, that green light, if you will, that is the most important needed thing right now.
Right. US IBC, in a statement in early March, had said that non-tariff barriers and red tape must be dismantled because these are hurdles to business. What would be some of the top 2 or 3 pain points, according to you?
Well, this is where every country is sovereign, and every country has its full right to make its own decisions about its national happiness and prosperity. I certainly respect that as a former diplomat. It's very important. But what we try to do very respectfully and very constructively is convey the perspectives of our members, who are Indian and American leading companies and a few international companies from Europe and Japan and Korea, to give granular insight to policymakers and decision makers about ways to advance their own policy goals. So, for instance, India has made it very clear that they want more FDI and that they want to have companies build in India and make in India. We encourage and applaud that. It's good for our national security from the perspective of Americans. And so what we try to do is offer insights into how to smooth that out in terms of ease of doing business, speed of doing business, bureaucratic decision-making on key issues that companies need to face, and then also regulatory and tax policies. I'll give you another example. International banks are taxed at a higher rate than Indian banks. It precludes a lot of them from expanding more in India in ways that would flow more FDI into India for these various enterprises. Government of India has taken steps to reduce that tax rate, but there's more that can be done to ensure parity that would really send a signal that India is open for business and open for foreign investment and open for putting that money to work in India, creating jobs and taxes and so much else. So we say these things privately and respectfully, constructively, with a view toward helping India succeed and helping US and India succeed. We do the same with the US government because the US Chamber is 120 years old. It is an institution that was designed to be independent, absolutely a clear voice of business, and to be able to use that voice with government, not in opposition, but frankly to help fuel government success by helping it understand the insights of the investor and business community. So it's a privilege to be in this job. I appreciate the fact that we are able to speak clearly and independently. We don't take any government funding from any government, and we never have and we never will. It's a founding element and principle for us so that we can convey the members' perspectives. And, you know, for things on like data, digital economy and the use of data, on energy, on life sciences, we are constantly offering inputs into both governments.
Right. You know, when it comes to the average applied tariff, the US Trade Representative's Office has been constantly talking about how certain countries have been treating them unfairly. They've also been speaking about a high rate of applied tariff by India, whereas the US average applied rate is somewhere in the range of 3% or so. What is the benchmark, according to you, a sweet spot where the average tariff, applied tariff by India should be brought down, or what should be the bare minimum in any deal, according to you?
Well, a lot of folks have been talking about 0 for 0. At the end of the day, free trade, when it really is free and when it really is fair, is really, really good for companies and countries and consumers. Look at how much the United States has grown over the past 70 years after the war. Look, and a lot of it has been predicated on free trade. Now, I think there is a sentiment, and President Trump has articulated that our openness, our willingness to lower our tariff barriers has been taken advantage of by some countries that have not reciprocated. So I think that he's trying to renovate and update our approach toward the world. But if we can get to 0 for 0 with India and on the vast majority of goods, I think that would be a great thing. You know, it's time to dream some very bold dreams. Why can't we do this? You know, how can it help us strategically in an era where we face shared challenges around the world? Let's strengthen our relationship. Let's make sure that Indians and Americans are prosperous and happy through the entire 21st century. So I say, be ambitious, right. Revert to the real principles of free trade.
Right. My final question would be about American companies deepening manufacturing in India. We've just got confirmation from Apple CEO Tim Cook, and he said that in the earnings call, that a bulk of Apple iPhones for the US market will now be manufactured in India. And in fact, probably as early as end of 2025, all phones for the US would be made in Indian manufacturing centers. So this is indeed good news. But what does this indicate about closer manufacturing cooperation, closer supply chain cooperation between US and Indian industry? And do you see this happening more across businesses in the US?
So I think businesses are being compelled right now by geopolitics and by rising problems between the US and China to find different and more diverse sources for their supplies of items that go into manufactured goods. India is perfectly positioned to take advantage of this situation. It is a trusted economy, a trusted geography, a trusted partner. Look at all of the joint statements between the Prime Minister and the President that emphasize trust. And this is where I would say to Indian friends, this is your moment. This is your moment. Seize full advantage, but then also apply the instruments and levers of the Indian state in a way that is enabling and helpful to the foreign investor. You know, India is complicated. It's diverse. It's a proud democracy. It has many, many layers of government, just like the United States. Everybody can speak freely. This is not China. It is not Vietnam. It is not some of these other countries where you talk to one person, you get an answer, and everything's done. If the Indian system, top to bottom, can realize that this is an enormous and historic opportunity, I think India can capitalize very greatly. But what the investor wants is predictability. They want an easily understandable system. They want clear answers. They want speedy implementation timelines, and they don't want surprises. You know, I know of a case where a company wanted to move an entire supply chain to India. This was a couple of years ago, where they had seen the wonderful statements by the Prime Minister and by the leaders of the government. And yet when they got into the process, they were sort of being pushed toward doing things that didn't make it as economically advantageous for them. It didn't link closely to the port infrastructure. The project site that was being suggested was hundreds of kilometers away. So my suggestion would be, think with the psychology of the international investor, put yourself a little bit in their shoes, and then take maximum advantage of this moment of huge strategic and economic opportunity for all of the people of India, and hasten India's rise to being a developed country by 2047.
All right, that's a great note to end on. Thank you very much, Ambassador Keshap, for joining us with your view. Clearly, you are articulating that it is India's moment. Seize it, but also break down those barriers and think how global investors would be looking at India. Very well said. Thanks, Ambassador Keshap, for joining us once again. We're taking a break here on Global Eye, but coming up on the other side, US and Ukraine have signed a deal to share profits and royalties from future sale of Ukrainian minerals and rare earth elements. We speak to Shelby Magid, Deputy Director of Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, on the other side. Stay tuned.